BNPtv.
Our services are not for sale, and we demand decent pensions for all workers.
This is Tony Bamber reporting for BNPtv from Preston, Lancashire. Today, a march, demonstration and protest is being held by public sector workers against government policy with regard specifically to their pensions. The government are insisting that public workers pay higher contributions and yet will receive a lower pension entitlement when they retire. This comes on top of an earlier government policy to extend the age at which people are entitled for pensions. This means that the government are telling their workers to work longer for less, and all this at a time of rising inflation, which means rising prices and therefore a decrease in real wages. This protest, although it is specifically about pensions, many people say that it should be seen in the context of protests across the European Union and across the Western world. Protests like the Occupy Wall Street, the Occupy the Stock Exchange, the student union protests and many other actions that are taking place. This particular protest amounts to the largest industrial action that has ever been taken by the public sector. There are unions going on strike today that have never ever been on strike before. However, whilst it is specifically about the pensions issue, many people argue that there are many issues which are fueling the discontent and anger amongst British workers. These issues, specifically for public sector workers, would include canteen workers who feel really offended about having to serve halal meat, teachers struggling to teach in classes where there are as many as 5 and 6 different languages spoken, civil servant workers who are annoyed at being passed over by politically correct policies which give foreigners preferential treatment when it comes to promotion and other entitlements. So it is in this context of rising anger at a whole range of issues that these protests should be seen. When it comes to the pensions issue, the workers are particularly annoyed at being told that they should make sacrifices for the incompetence and corruption of our leaders. They're being told that they must accept cuts to put right the public deficit, the amount of overspending that is being done by government. However, they argue that it is not the public sector that should be making sacrifices, but it should be our leaders. Our leaders, people in the top FTSE 100 companies, for instance, have awarded themselves a 40% pay rise in the last 12 months. The pensions being cut here are for normal workers. MPs' pensions are not being cut. Incomes at the top of society are rising, whilst incomes at the bottom are decreasing. And this is what is fueling the anger and discontent, not just in the public sector, but across the whole country. We will now pass over and talk to some of the Unison members, some of the public sector workers who are prepared to speak on camera. I have with me now a young married couple who are both public sector workers, and I'm going to ask them what are the issues that are particularly which have caused them to come out on strike today to take this industrial action. Would you like to tell our viewers why you're so annoyed?
Yeah, first of all, the government have reduced our pensions by 15% by changing from the retail price index to the consumer price index. That's gone, we've lost that. Now what they want to do, they want us want to make us pay more, which will be equivalent to an extra day's pay per month for the rest of our life. We'll have to work longer and then get less at the end of it. It's just to bail out the bankers, we all know that, and it's wrong. So if the union calls a strike, we're going to strike. You know, we're passionate about that. If we don't stand up to the government, they're just going to stand all over us, and we're not having that.
And how long have you worked in the public sector?
Probably about 14 years now.
And how long have you worked in the public sector?
About 6 years.
Yeah. About 6 years?
Yeah. But it's not just about the pensions anymore. This pension strike has just given people a reason to stand up to the government. Yes, initially it was about the pensions, but I think a lot more people are now voicing what is really mattering as well.
And what would that be?
For instance, look at the housing crisis. The government is saying, you know, we're short on this many houses, that many houses. Yet walk down the street and see how many British people are homeless. And my emphasis on the word British, you wouldn't see any Muslim homeless people, any Polish homeless people, Turkish, etc, etc. It's all the British that are homeless, and same goes for jobs. They're saying that there's thousands and thousands of jobs needed. You go out there and look at who is actually in the workplace, and it's because it's cheaper labour, and the British people are suffering yet again. And people have had enough now. I mean, you know, it's just, we're being taken over. Another thing is mass immigration. That's another thing that people have had enough of. We're not against immigration totally, but when they're taking over and having better rights than British people who were born and bred here, come on people, wake up, there's something wrong in that. You know, if I was going to go on holiday to Egypt or something, I'd have to abide by their rules, which out of respect you would. But why is it different when people come here? Sharia law, they're trying to make that enforceable. Come on, it's England, British people. Why are the government letting us be overrun? It's just enough is enough now. People have had enough, and this strike is just one reason for people to say enough is enough, and for the government to actually take note, because they can ignore 50 people, but when it's a national strike on this magnitude, they have to do something about it.
Well, thank you very much for those views. I believe you're a young mother.
I am, yes.
What do you think of the future will be for your child?
I don't think there is a future for my child. I worry about my child's future. It frightens me to think, what is this country going to be like in 10 years' time? I worry about my child's education. I worry about what is going to be provided for him when he is older. Again, back to the pensions. If it's going the way it's going, we won't have a pension to look after our child or future children. And there's little things like nursery age children, they're taking note and reporting it on a database if they use any derogatory terms. I mean, they're children, they don't know what they're saying, and I found out that that stays with them for the rest of their life, and that is another government controlling issue. Just for instance, just before the march, I was looking in the Lancashire Evening Post, which is a local paper. The headlines were strike makes cancer patients suffer. It doesn't. Not once in the article did it ask for an opinion of a consultant oncologist. Again, it's the media trying to control people and make the members of the public be angry against us and why we're striking. They don't see the real reason.
Well, thank you very, very much indeed for being so forthright and honest with your views. Do you think those sorts of views are common across the public sector?
Well, yeah, I mean, I speak to people, and if you open up to people about issues that bother you, I mean, they'll tell you theirs. Another thing people think is we have gold-plated pensions. We don't. That's rubbish. I mean, between £4,000 and £7,000. Honestly, I mean, you know, it's not fair, and we're just not going to put up with it. I mean, another issue which I've spoken to somebody about recently, a number of people, is the EU. I mean, we had a referendum, well, if you can call it a referendum, and it was, you know, the politicians were forced to vote against it. I mean, what happened to democracy?
Do you think that the sort of anger which is clearly demonstrated today and is being demonstrated across the country with this nationwide day of anger, do you think it will continue?
Yes, definitely. If the government don't stand up and actually take note and do something about it, it's going to continue and it's going to get worse and worse because, as I say, people have had enough and there's no such thing as freedom of speech anymore. You've got to be careful with what you say. It's just political correctness gone mad now, and again, this is another reason why people are coming out, because it gives people a voice without worried about backlash or anything like that, and it's just absolutely atrocious the way this country has gone. You know, it's like when I was growing up, if we misbehave, you know, you were scared just at the thought of, I'm going to tell the police. You know, if you got in trouble at school, you were terrified to go home. But nowadays, the youth of today is different, and the government are moulding the youth of today. And for me as a mum, that terrifies me.
So could you tell us how long you've worked in the public sector?
I've worked in the public sector for 11 years as a teacher.
As a teacher? Oh, you're a primary school teacher?
I'm a primary school teacher.
And what has motivated you to take industrial action and bother to come out today on this protest?
Well, I think push has come to the shove. It's been a long time coming. Pensions, it's something that every public sector holds dear, and I think trying to cut our pensions, asking us to work longer, pay more, work longer, get less, it's not fair.
Does it annoy you that those at the top of society are enjoying large increases in their wages and the politicians' pensions in particular is not being cut?
It does a little bit. The spin is that we're all in it together. We're certainly not all in it together. Some of it are in it a little bit more comfortably than the rest of us are. And there's definitely alternatives. I don't see why we should have to pay for the mistakes that were made in the financial sector.
Are you disenchanted with the new establishment?
You're talking about the government, the coalition?
I'm talking more about the ruling class, the new ruling class.
I'm not so sure it's a situation of being disenchanted with the ruling class. I think it's more the government situation. I think there are alternatives.
What would be those alternatives?
Well, I think a Robin Hood tax, asking the banks to pay a little bit more to help get us out of the mess that they got us into in the first place, rather than ask the public sector to pay for the mistakes.
Would you agree with cuts in any other area of government expenditure, like on the European Union, foreign aid budget, or any of those things?
Well, I know there's an absolutely huge amount of cash spent on defence, and I'm sure there could be savings made there. European Union, maybe. I'm sure there's other areas where we can make savings.
Well, thank you very much for talking to us today. Thank you very much. Does it annoy you that the MP's pension is not being cut?
Yes.
Does it annoy you that those at the top of society are giving themselves large pay rises?
Oh, yes.
Talking about the last large depression in the late 20s and early 30s, that ended up in World War. Do you think there is a danger internationally of things breaking down to such an extent again?
Well, I think that danger is always there. That danger is particularly there when the disadvantaged majority on this planet get fed up of having all their efforts going towards making our lives north of the equator comfortable.